The story of Joseph begins in a seemingly calm way, but it quickly turns into one of the most emotional and profound narratives in the entire book of Genesis. In Genesis 37 verses 1 to 36, we see not only a family conflict, but also the beginning of a journey that reveals how human decisions, jealousy, and suffering can at the same time be part of something much greater. Jacob was living in a land where his father had lived as a foreigner in the land of Canaan. It was a large family, full of stories, promises, and also conflicts. Among all the sons, there was a young man named Joseph. He was about 17 years old. He was still very young, but he was already working with his brothers, taking care of the flocks. The Bible mentions something interesting right at the beginning. Joseph brought his father reports about the bad behavior of some of his brothers. This already makes us think about something. Imagine the atmosphere within that family. Did Joseph's brothers see this as honesty? Or did they interpret it as someone trying to appear better in front of their father? This small detail already prepares the stage for something bigger. Sometimes family conflicts begin silently, almost imperceptibly, accumulating feelings that later explode. But there was another even more delicate factor. The text says that Jacob loved Joseph more than all his other sons because he was the son of his old age. To demonstrate this special affection, Jacob made for Joseph a long robe, probably a distinctive garment that indicated honor or a special position within the family. Now imagine the scene. While the brothers wore simple working clothes, Joseph wore a robe that drew attention. It was almost impossible not to notice the difference. The verse says something very direct. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all of them, they hated him and could not speak peacefully to him. This detail is very human. The problem was not only the robe. The problem was what it represented. How many times throughout history, and even today, do feelings of jealousy arise when someone seems to receive more attention, more honor, or more recognition? But the story does not stop there. One day, Joseph had a dream. And it was not an ordinary dream. He dreamed that he and his brothers were in the field tying bundles of grain. Suddenly, his bundle stood upright while the bundles of his brothers bowed down before it. Joseph told the dream. Perhaps he told it with innocence. Perhaps he was simply sharing something he found interesting. Or maybe he did not realize how it would sound to his brothers. But the reaction was immediate. They said, "Do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us?" The text says they hated him even more because of his dreams. Shortly afterward, Joseph had another dream. This time, the sun, the moon, and 11 stars bowed down before him. When he told this to his father and brothers, even Jacob reacted. He asked, "Will I and your mother and your brothers really come and bow down to the ground before you?" The Bible says something very interesting here. The brothers were jealous, but Jacob kept the matter in his mind. It was as if he was thinking, could something greater be happening here? This part of the story makes us reflect. How many times does something seem strange or impossible at first, but later we realize there was a purpose? But at that moment, for Joseph's brothers, it did not look like a divine plan. It looked like arrogance. It looked like a threat. It sounded like someone saying he would be superior to them. Sometime later, the brothers were pasturing the flocks far from home, near Shechem. Jacob asked Joseph to go there and check if everything was going well with them. Joseph obeyed. This seemingly simple decision would completely change his life. When he arrived in the region, Joseph did not immediately find his brothers. A man found him wandering in the field and asked what he was looking for. Joseph said he was searching for his brothers. The man told him they had gone to Dothan. So Joseph continued his journey. Imagine that walk. Joseph was going to meet his own brothers, without imagining what was in their hearts. But from a distance, the brothers saw him approaching, and before he even arrived, they began to conspire. They said something that reveals how much resentment had already grown inside them. Here comes that dreamer. Notice the tone. It was not simply Joseph's name. It was a label filled with contempt. Then they made a terrible plan. They said, "Let's kill him, throw him into one of these cisterns, and say that a wild animal devoured him. Then we'll see what becomes of his dreams." It is astonishing to think about this. Their hatred had reached such a deep level that they were willing to kill their own brother. Here an important question for reflection appears. How can negative feelings grow so much inside the human heart? Often it does not begin with something big. It begins with small comparisons, small resentments, small perceived injustices. But when those feelings are fed for a long time, they can turn into something destructive. Fortunately, one of the brothers, Reuben, heard the plan. He tried to save Joseph. Reuben said, "Let's not take his life." Instead, he suggested throwing him into an empty cistern in the desert. Reuben's secret intention was to come back later and rescue him. So when Joseph arrived, the brothers grabbed him. The first thing they did was take off his robe. That robe that symbolized favoritism. That robe that fueled their jealousy. Then they threw him into the cistern. Imagine what Joseph must have felt in that moment. Confusion, fear, betrayal. He was not being attacked by strangers. They were his own brothers. But the story takes another unexpected turn. While Joseph was in the cistern, the brothers sat down to eat. This shows how hardened their hearts had become at that moment. While their brother was trapped there, they were having a meal. But then they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites passing by. They were coming from Gilead, carrying spices, balm, and resin to Egypt. Then Judah had an idea. He said, "What profit is it if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Let's sell him to the Ishmaelites." This sentence is very revealing. What profit is it? It was no longer only hatred. Now there was also personal gain. Joseph was taken out of the cistern and sold for 20 pieces of silver. And so he was taken to Egypt. At that moment, something apparently tragic was happening. A young man had been betrayed by his own family, taken from his home, sold as a slave, carried away to a foreign land. But anyone who reads the full story knows something important. This was not the end of the story. It was only the beginning. Later, when Reuben returned to the cistern and saw that Joseph was no longer there, he was desperate. He tore his clothes and said, "The boy is not there. Where can I turn now?" The brothers then decided to cover up what they had done. They took Joseph's robe, killed a goat, and dipped the robe in the blood. Then they brought the garment to Jacob. They did not directly say what had happened. They simply asked, "See whether this is your son's robe." Jacob recognized it immediately, and he reached the conclusion the brothers wanted him to reach. "A fierce animal has devoured my son." The Bible describes Jacob's pain very powerfully. He tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned for many days. His sons and daughters tried to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. He said, "I will go down to the grave mourning for my son." Meanwhile, Joseph was being taken to Egypt, where he would be sold to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh. When we look at this story, several deep questions arise. Why did God allow something so unjust to happen? Why did someone innocent have to go through so much pain? Do difficult moments mean that everything is lost? Joseph's story shows something extraordinary. Sometimes what seems to be the worst moment of our lives can be the beginning of something we still cannot see. Joseph was sold as a slave, but that path would take him to Egypt. And in Egypt he would go through experiences that, in the future, would place him in a position capable of saving many lives, including the very family that betrayed him. This leads us to another reflection. How many times do we judge our story only by the present moment? When something goes wrong, we think everything is over. But the Bible often shows that God sees the entire story, while we see only a small chapter. Joseph did not know at that moment. He did not know that one day he would govern in Egypt. He did not know that he would save his family from famine. He did not know that his dreams would come true. All he knew was that he was being taken far from home. And perhaps that is one of the deepest lessons of this story. We do not always understand what is happening to us at the moment. But that does not mean our story has lost its direction. Sometimes what seems like a detour is actually part of the path. The question that remains for each of us is this. When we face difficult moments, do we react with despair? Or can we trust that our story is still being written? Because if there is one thing Joseph's journey teaches, it is this. Dreams can be attacked. They can be ridiculed. They can even seem buried for a while. But when something is part of a greater purpose, no cistern, no betrayal, and no desert can stop what is still to come.
If this story spoke to your heart, don't stop here. Subscribe to the channel and follow every chapter of the Bible told as powerful, easy to understand stories. Leave a like, share with someone who needs to hear this message, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next episodes. See you in the next chapter.